Welcome to today's episode, brought to you by the Women in Medicine Summit, a transformational CME conference happening September 13th to 14th at the Drake Hotel in Chicago. Engage in leadership programming, learn negotiation skills, receive on-site coaching and mentoring, and see who will win this year's I Stand With Her awards. This year, we're excited to offer unique programming that includes a special session on how using improv comedy can bring fun back into medicine. We also have financial sessions tailored to help you navigate the complexities of personal and professional finances. Discover ways to advance into leadership roles, combat burnout, and either reignite your love for your current role or find joy in a new career path. Don't forget our Friday evening gala, a highlight this year you definitely won't want to miss. Register now at womeninmedicinesummit.org and be part of the movement that is shaping the future of healthcare. Join us to network, learn, and celebrate the power of women in medicine.
Do you love to travel? Did you dream that you would live in another country someday, but being a doctor and all the things that we do seems to be getting in the way? You have to listen to today's episode with Dr. Kristine Goins. She's a board-certified integrative adult and pediatric psychiatrist and world traveler. Prior to pursuing a lifestyle of freedom and adventure by becoming a digital nomad, Dr. Goins completed her adult psychiatry residency at Emory University and her child and adolescent psychiatry fellowship at Yale. Given her passion for exploring healing approaches outside of conventional practice, she also completed an integrative medicine fellowship at the Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine. Having served in several healthcare settings and various leadership positions within academic centers, Dr. Goins has witnessed firsthand the impact that burnout, stress, and work-life imbalance can have on physicians' lives. In today's episode, she shares what a digital nomad is, which was a new definition for me, and how she moves throughout the world, working as a child psychiatrist via telemedicine, with practices in the United States, and then explores the world. She shares at one point in the episode her love of wine and how she wanted to become a sommelier and learn more about wine, and how she just moves to a wine region and learns more about wine. And she only works 2 days a week. I'm telling you that she has found some amazing secret sauce that she's sharing some of the ingredients with you today. Welcome to the Revitalizing Doctor podcast. We interview trailblazers in medicine that embody the Revitalize Women vision to empower women to innovate and influence medicine, to value authenticity, respect, and work-life harmony. We recognize the challenges in medicine, and we're committed to providing coaching-informed strategies to help you go from surviving to thriving. I am so excited for today's episode. I love to travel, and we have the guru of doctoring and travel today, Dr. Kristine Goins. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Tell us a little bit about you and how you became a doctor, and then we'll move into what you're doing now.
So I wanted to be a doctor since I was 8 years old. So it's a pretty long time coming. I was in love with science and teaching. And so that was always my passion, labs. So I would do a lot of science enrichment programs during the summertime. And so that was my trajectory. I hadn't had any physicians in my family, and I was already probably in medical school when I found out that my mom had always wanted to be a doctor. So I thought it was quite interesting. So it was never something that was talked about or pressured in any way, but it just was something that I naturally gravitated towards. And so later in my, high school, going into college years, I kind of focused in on biology, met a lot of people. I had a lot of close friends on the same path, which made it a lot easier. And once I got to medical school, really felt that out of all the different classes that I was taking, behavioral sciences was my favorite. And that moved me into psychiatry. So
I've always found that very interesting, how someone chooses medical school into the psychiatry path when there's so many other avenues to go into mental health. So you're saying you already kind of knew you were going to go on that path before you went to medical school?
Initially when I got to medical school, I thought about psychiatry. I also thought about surgery. And it was only during my training that I realized a lot of people flip-flop between surgery and psychiatry, which I hadn't noticed before. And I think it's because they're both very intrusive in different ways. But I had thought seriously about surgery. And I think though both were very interesting to me, it's something about the mind and how our thoughts produce our feelings, how we're able to manifest things in our lives through our thoughts, that just seems really powerful to me to kind of work in that particular area. And also, I really wanted work-life balance. That was important to me even before medical school. So I thought it would be slightly easier as a psychiatrist than a surgeon. So that's another thing that kind of pushed me in that direction. And I don't like to blame things on my mom, but she's also a psychologist. So I'm sure that has also impacted my idea about focusing on mental health, because that's something she's passionate about too.
So you go through medical school, and then where did you go to residency?
So for residency, I went to Emory in Atlanta. And so that was a really great experience learning about psychiatry on the 13th floor of Grady. That was a really beautiful experience. But I think it's also during training that many people as physicians start to experience their first episodes of burnout, given like the really high work hours and things like that. And so that was probably my first experience with that, working as a doctor as opposed to medical school. But psychiatry in and of itself, I really loved it. And I already knew going into psychiatry at residency that I was going to do child psychiatry. So I knew that that was like my trajectory.
What are you doing now?
Right now, I'm still working as a child psychiatrist. After my child and adolescent fellowship, I did a fellowship in integrative medicine because I was always really interested in exploring alternative paths to treatment. I wanted to have a bigger toolbox, more to offer my patients other than different approaches to therapy and different medications. And so that was something that really drew me. So I work now as an integrative adult, child, and adolescent psychiatrist. I contract with different medical institutions and also consult with different pediatric practices and offer my services that way. And that's how I stay engaged in the work that I really love. I do that 2 days a week. And then the other 5 days I travel full time, exploring the world as a digital nomad.
And when you practice child psychiatry right now, is it via telemedicine or do you do any in person?
No, I don't do any in person. Even when I was working in academia, I was always doing a mixture. Like way before the, pandemic, I was always doing a mixture. And then after that, I just became 100% virtual.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Are you a physician mom with school-aged children feeling utterly exhausted? My friend Dr. Sheeta Shaffi invites you to take a little time this summer to join her in a small, intimate group for meaningful conversations. Dr. Shaffi is an emergency physician, coach, and mom to 8-year-old twins. She understands firsthand what you're going through. This isn't a pizza party or a yoga class. You'll meet for 2 one-hour sessions twice a month starting in July to help you move out of exhaustion, let go of mom guilt, and live a life you're not only proud of, but can truly enjoy. Connect with her on LinkedIn or Instagram at Sheeta Shafie to learn more. Sheeta is spelled Shideh, and Shafie is spelled Shafie. You can also check the show notes for a link so you can connect with her there as well. And with your virtual practice, so I do just a small amount of telemedicine. I actually started doing it during the pandemic because at the very early phase of the pandemic, when we were told that, if you get exposed to COVID, you're off for 2 weeks, I was getting out of the military, and the idea of now having to make money was front of mind. I'm like, okay, what happens if that happens over and over again, that you keep getting exposed? I'm an ER doctor, so telemedicine seemed like a good safety net in case I was exposed and healthy and could still see patients. Currently for me, I carry 3 medical licenses, and I haven't needed to expand beyond those 3 because I live in California. The volume of patients in California is huge. And then Florida has, for our listeners that might be thinking about this, Florida allows for you to have a telemedicine only license without having to get the full medical license. It was actually just filling out one form, which was amazing. Shout out Florida for that specific thing, not for anything else in particular right now. And then Iowa. I'm from Iowa. And so I decided to get a medical license there when I was thinking about maybe doing some locums work there. Ultimately, I've not decided to do any locums in Iowa, but my parents are from there. I just decided to keep those 3 medical license, and I don't do any others, where some telemedicine people have 20, 25, 30, and that just administratively was a no-go for me. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your approach to that or advice?
Yeah, for me, I only have licenses in DC and Virginia. And so, like you, haven't really found the need to expand beyond that. There's a lot of need, I think, for psychiatry in many different areas. And also for me, just in terms of how I like to practice, it was really important for me to have my lifestyle be consistent with my values and how I like to spend my time. And so I really like to keep my work to about 15 hours at max 20 hours a week. And so having more licenses sounds like more volume and more hours of working, which would not be my plan.
Awesome. That's great advice for people. The second part of what you said is you practice child psychiatry via telemedicine. And then you said something else after that. Digital.
Oh, that I was a digital nomad.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Unpack that for the listeners.
Yeah. A digital nomad is someone who works online and typically travels, full time. Depending on who they are, it might be a different cadence, depending on how slow or fast they like to travel. My cadence has been switching countries about every 3 months. And so far, I've lived in about 9 or 10 countries. I've visited a lot of different countries, but living in about 10 different countries since I left the US. And so all of my healthcare, my day-to-day life happens out abroad.
I imagine there's a few doctor listeners right now that maybe are feeling anxiety when they hear that, what do you mean you just move from country to country and that your healthcare, what happens if you get sick? How do you navigate this? Do you have healthcare insurance? Those are probably a few of the first questions in the super type A people that I identify with.
You can move as fast. That's why I mentioned moving as fast or as slow as you want. For some people, they want to stay at one location for a whole year, or maybe multiple years. I know some nomads who move every week. For me, that's would make my head spin. For me, I really like to develop meaningful connections, particularly with locals in every country. And so for me, it takes a little time to be able to develop those kind of relationships. So I try to move more slowly. In terms of medical care, that's actually been one of the biggest revelations I think I've had being a doctor in the US and a patient also, obviously, but then becoming a patient in a lot of other systems, particularly within Latin America, and really just learning about how much more, especially for me being a nomad, right? So when you're a nomad, a lot of times, especially if your income is coming from the US, you're practicing geological arbitrage, so you are getting your income in a currency that's of higher value than maybe where you are living. And so you're able to have a lower cost of living in terms of where you are, but you're probably able to have a higher quality of life because of your income and some of the standards that are within that country. So for me, when it comes to healthcare, a lot of times I'm living in an environment that's actually much more conducive to taking long walks on the beach and having high quality fruits and vegetables without having to specifically go to an organic market. I'm just going to any market, on the corner. So it's a different pace of life also because I'm working much less. I've found the health systems are much more efficient. For example, I was in Ecuador, living in a city, had an urgent health condition. I went to the ER or, their hospital. I mentioned it within 5 minutes. I was already scheduled to see someone. I saw the nurse within 15 minutes. They automatically sent the vitals to my phone. I saw the primary care provider within the next 20 minutes. They met with me and during that appointment said, you really need to see a specialist. They picked up the phone, made a call. I was in the office with a specialist within another 20 minutes. They told me that I needed imaging and the imaging was scheduled for the next day. The next day I went to imaging and a radiologist did my imaging, explained everything during the imaging with what they were finding and then told me I could take a seat. They went and wrote up everything, handed me an envelope with all the results, and off I went. That is probably unlikely to happen today in the US. And all of that probably cost me maybe $200. And I do have international health insurance so that I am covered in any country that I want to go to in the world. But it is very comforting to know that even in a situation like that if I wanted to cover it, I could cover it out of pocket and that I could be seen so efficiently.
Interesting. How do you choose the countries you go to?
I've been wanting to travel since I was a teenager, so I've developed a list of countries since then that I've always wanted to go to. So sometimes it's checking off my list. I also, with the time freedom of working much less, I'm able to kind of delve into a lot of different passions. And one of my passions that I had since medical school was becoming a wine professional. And so a lot of times I will go to different wine regions and study. That's why I just left Argentina and I was then, spending time in Mendoza, which is a big area for the Malbec grape. And so I'll spend time in the wine regions and I really love the water. So sometimes I'm just like, where's water? I'm going.
That's awesome. And so for how many years have you been living as a digital nomad?
It's been 2.5 years now, going on 3 years.
And do you foresee it ending anytime soon?
No, it's been like a really incredible journey for me, someone who really thrives in new environments and loves to meet new people. I think it is something that I'll probably do forever. I'll probably do it at different paces. So one thing I'm working on now is setting up a home base on different continents and, increasing my international real estate portfolio. So that way I can have like a home somewhere that I can go to, but not necessarily just one place to settle down.
I'm guessing this will be a really hard question for you because it's somewhat individual, but what's been your favorite place that you visited that you keep going back to in your mind and wanting to go back to physically?
My favorite place so far has been Bocas del Toro. They're Caribbean islands off the coast of Panama. Life there, I lived there for about 4 or 5 months. And it was like waking up in the morning from bed, had a view of the sea and the mountains, would jump on my bike, ride up the coast 30 minutes, into the jungle for yoga class, come back, take a boat taxi to another island, watch the dolphins, journal. Like it was just kind of, it felt like paradise. But of course, that was just like the normal way of life there on the island. But it, to me, was a really, really special place, a special culture, someplace that I'll likely go back to soon.
Do you speak any foreign languages?
Spanish.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
Since you were younger, like high school or?
It was my minor in college.
Nice.
So.
That's really helpful. Since you've been traveling for a few years, do you ever invite people from your family or friends in the US to come meet you places? Has that been a good thing? Would you recommend it?
No, it's been a really awesome thing. Fortunately, I've not had like any thing go wrong. It's been really smooth sailing. But yeah, I think having family come visit me has been like so amazing. They basically just have a built-in vacation. It's just like, where are you now? Okay, that's where I'm going. Housing is taken care of. So that's been really amazing because sometimes I'll go to a certain country. Like this year, I lived in Brazil for some time and was there in Rio during Carnival, which is such a huge time to be in the city. And, one of my sisters came and we got to have that experience together. And so most times a family member will meet me at least like every couple of months or so and share time together. One of my sisters and I, we live somewhere on earth in another country for a month together each year. And so we have those kind of traditions too.
Awesome. What would be your advice for somebody that's curious about maybe dipping their toes in the sand and giving this a try?
If a passion for travel is something that you really want to explore, think about where you want to go. Think about how long you would want to be there, particularly if you're a physician. Consider, is it possible? And you might want to think a little bit outside the box, but is it possible to digitize parts of your expertise that would allow you the freedom to be wherever you want it to be, whenever you want it to be there, and do the passion that you loved? And so it could be just starting by, going for a week somewhere, seeing how that feels, taking a month off and exploring a new location. You could do little short trips at first, and then you could slowly, expand. I know some physicians who like to take at least 3 months off at different points with their kids and go away. Others who actually take a year or half a year off so that their kids get to explore, other cultures and practice their languages and things like that. So I think you could just start by looking online, going on YouTube and seeing what the different locations are like. When I was first exploring, I would, listen into different videos and podcasts about what people were experiencing in different countries, what they did for healthcare, really tap in with others who are either expats, so they kind of just live in one place abroad, or other digital nomads who are traveling quite a bit and exploring different countries. I found it really helpful to ask questions and just be really curious about how they navigated different issues. Like for me, I most of the time am traveling solo, and a lot of people had questions about, what if you get lonely, or how you navigate certain things that might pop up. Maybe people who are traveling with a group or a friend might not necessarily experience so much. So I would say just dipping your toe in. And then if you really love it, just gradually expanding that.
I want to come back to something in your biography. You mentioned that you did some training in integrative medicine as well. That is a topic that keeps popping up on the podcast. We've had various physicians that have an integrative practice, and I'm very interested in it as well. You know, my interest really stems from so many years of being an emergency physician. There starts to be almost this fatigue in that many of the problems I see, we're not getting at the root. And actually, one of my friends and on the podcast, Raquel Harrison, has a practice called Acute to Root. And she's an emergency physician that does lifestyle medicine now. But I'm just curious what that training looked like for you, because I do want to give our listeners a potpourri of like different ways that they could access that, because I do think it's an important way to broaden our practice. And for so many of us that are frustrated with the lack of health, we went to be doctors and it doesn't really feel like I'm making people healthy that often. I'm more like managing disease.
Absolutely. And I think that sentiment is exactly what made me pursue integrative medicine. And so for me, my training looked like really learning more about alternative approaches to healthcare, whether it was different health systems like Ayurveda or traditional Chinese medicine, or whether it was delving really deep into, nutrition. From medical school, I just remember us having like one semester or half a semester about nutrition. I don't know if it's changed, but having really in-depth training about, nutrition, about movement, about mind-body approaches, about the use of botanicals and other herbs for health. So it was really well-rounded, I would say, in science-based, evidence-based approaches to healthcare in a myriad of in all of the different specialties. And so even though, my specialty is psychiatry and my specialty is child and adolescent psychiatry, I really found it useful to understand a holistic approach to all of the specialties, because no matter who I treat, I still have patients that have cardiac issues and have endocrine issues, and I can apply what I know to at least think through their different comorbidities and what might be helpful, and even who I might want to connect with in regards to their other concerns and medical issues. So
what did your integrative training look like? Was it online?
Yeah, so I trained at Andrea Austin's program at the University of Arizona. My 2-year fellowship actually happened during quarantine. And so usually you do have to go every year and spend like a week in person. But because it was during that time, 100% of it was virtual.
Could you give an example? Because I think with the integrative medicine, one thing that I think is hard, I'm sure that you run into this a lot with the patients that you see and what I see in the emergency room, is how do you make that accessible to people of different socioeconomic backgrounds? Because I think like a lot of the integrative, sometimes it feels like a luxury and not something that's accessible to people that don't have a lot of money or are seeing you on Medi-Cal or, whatever their state insurance is. Could you give an example of how you integrate that integrative practice?
I think a lot of the ideas around integrative medicine, I grew up with a lot of those things, and I don't think I conceptualized it as integrative medicine. And I didn't come from a family that had a lot of money. It was quite the opposite. But I think they are things that can be really accessible. For instance, movement. Movement is something that I don't think we kind of stress, or a lot of physicians might not have as much time as they need to kind of do a lot of motivational interviewing around movement and exercise. But that's something that many people do have access to. not everyone has like a safe place that they can walk around. But there are a lot of people who do or who could, get to a certain park or have access to, when I lived in Washington, D.C., there were recreation centers that were free all over the city that you could go to. You could pay $5 to $10 to have a whole swimming class for months, so they really did try to make it affordable. So I think part of it is also being creative and working with patients around different opportunities, different programs that they could be utilizing in that area. And then when it comes to certain things like mindfulness, mind-body work, there's access to so many apps now, and most people do have smartphones, so they probably have access to different apps. But whether it's an online group program that focuses on meditation and mindfulness, or whether it's an app that allows them to do yoga, a lot of the rec centers and other centers, I know a lot of programs now even have like a free day or a community day where they allow people to come in and practice gratuitously. So I think for me, it was integrating things like that, really helping people to utilize what is accessible. I think when it comes to nutrition and using food as medicine, that can be a big area for people who don't have access, depending on what communities they live in. So I think sometimes that's something to consider and look through. When I was living in DC, some of the social programs did also include access to certain organic markets that would be in the city at certain times where you could get access to those foods, but it's not easy for everyone because they might be working during that time. So I do agree that when it comes to access, it is something to consider and look through. But, in fact, even when I think back to when I was a child and I had a cough, my grandmother pulled out honey. When I was feeling low, my aunt put me in a bath and she, put aromatherapy and she had lavender going, and these are the same things that I mentioned to my patients. If you're having a lot of anxiety at night, get a diffuser, or, can you put a little lavender oil with a carrier oil and, put it on your pillow or rub it on you. It doesn't always have to be things that are really expensive, but it is something to definitely be conscious about, I would say.
I love that. I wish we had a lavender diffuser in the emergency department. I just want like a lavender diffuser and some tea. I think tea is so therapeutic, and I just want to like give people a cup of tea, a blanket, and smell some lavender.
I think you might have a lot of people just leave the ED from there. Just put that in the waiting room.
I agree. It's just so much of what we do is teaching people to self-soothe. Somehow that's like I honestly think they should be teaching it in kindergarten.
I 100% agree. And, that was some of the work that I used to do was being in schools. I worked in like 6 different schools in DC. That's such an important thing for the little ones to learn. And I think it completely can change their trajectory. So
amazing. Well, this has been such a delightful conversation. You have such an interesting mix of what you do professionally and the personal journey that you are on. I'm guessing there's a few listeners that are thinking about putting their house on the market and becoming a digital nomad. Maybe before they do that, is there some way they could connect with you and like learn a little bit more about this?
Absolutely. They could visit my website at thenomadmd.com. I'm also on Instagram at the Nomad MDs and Facebook at the Nomad MDs. And if they're also very interested, I'm having a webinar next month, November 14th at 7 p.m. EST, where I'm going to talk about how doctors can fast track to financial freedom through travel. And they can find that at thenomadmd.com/November 14 webinar.
You're coming to us from Toronto?
Yes. I'm in Toronto today.
Okay. Mm-hmm. What's been your favorite thing to do in Toronto?
Eat. That's what I've been doing in Toronto, eating.
Amazing. Well, I just want to thank you so much for sharing your message with our audience, and it really resonates with what we try to tell everyone here at Revitalize is school is out and you can do whatever you want now.
Amen. Thank you. Beautiful.
Thanks for listening to The Revitalizing Doctor, a project of Revitalize Women Physician Circle. Our mission is to connect women physicians and allies through innovative, value-based coaching methods that align trust, support, accountability, and skill development to ignite the courage and clarity necessary to take bold actions, create change, and thrive. If you're interested in working with us, check out our website at peoplealwayshcc.com/revitalize or email us at revitalizemm.info@gmail.com. This podcast represents the views of our host and guest. It does not reflect the views of any institution we work for or with.
Hi, it's Dr. Risa E. Lewis, dropping in to tell you about a book that Dr. Adara Landry and I wrote. It's called Microskills, Small Actions, Big Impact. It's a business self-help book coming in 2024 by HarperCollins. Pre-order now. Microskills, Small Actions, Big Impact, wherever you buy your books.